Beyond the Wrench with Jay Goninen from WrenchWay.
Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. Pleasure to be back with you today. And before we get started, if you've enjoyed listening to Beyond the Wrench, be sure to rate and review this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you listen to your podcast. We want to thank all of you for listening and truly appreciate your support. It's grown a lot over the last couple of years, and it's all because of you. And if you ever have any suggestions or want to see something with the show, make sure you reach out. We're very open to suggestions and trying to make the show as great as we can for you. As for today's show, I have with me Chris Craig, and Chris has a really, really interesting background, one that I think is going to help us understand technicians and advisors at a little bit different level, coming from a boots on the ground perspective, and really a unique take on where he's ended up in the industry. So how you doing, Chris?
I'm doing actually great. Finally back in my home office, which is my favorite place to be. I'm really happy. I want to thank you for letting me come on. I'm still humbled to death that people actually want me to come on things like podcasts and talk to them about certain things. And it's just been a wild adventure. So thank you for having me on.
Oh, I love having you. The conversation that we had prior to this was a lot of fun, and I look forward to today's discussion. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you come from, and how'd you end up where you're at?
Well, let me start with where I came from. That's easy.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania is my home state. I'm from northwestern PA, real small rural town, lots of snow, lots of cold. I've been all over the place ever since, per college and military, where I finally landed here in Tennessee. I've been here for about 3 years. I live just south of Nashville. So that's kind of like the short term of the long term of my logistical trip around the country. But I do a lot of traveling nowadays, but I have a long history in automotive, a long history in education as far as automotive goes. I've been in the military for going on 9 years now, and I have worn many hats as far as professions go. So I have been all over the spectrum in the last 10 years of my adult life.
I always ask our military vets that come on here what their take is on when somebody thanks them for their service. And the reason for it is I've got friends that are military vets, really close friends, and I'm like, hey, man, thanks for your service. And they're like, oh, that's very awkward when you say that. So, so I always try to be as not awkward as possible, but apologies if I do make it awkward.
No, with me, I mean, so the very first time it ever happened, I was in an airport, and I was fumbling over myself, wondering what in the world do I possibly say to that, because I was in basic training. I haven't done anything yet, and it still feels that way to this day. I'm 9 years into it, but it's just an appreciation, and I understand the public just wants to appreciate, so just simply say, thank you for the support, and then you move on.
You're much kinder than my friends are. They're like, you idiot, stop saying that.
That's the customer service side.
All right, so let's talk further about you. What got you into the automotive business in that space to start with?
So starting out in the automotive industry, I come from a small rural town. And in a small rural town, you got a few things. You have hunting, fishing, sports, and you have anything that has to do with dirt bikes, four-wheelers, and stuff like that. And that would be my first introduction into it. Being a little kid with a go-kart would break down. It's really useful to know how to fix it so you can continue having fun. So that was my first small introduction into automotive. And once I got higher up in high school, 10th grade came around, Votech was offered. So I thought, why don't I go to Votech for, next 3 years for automotive. I went there, conducted that class. I graduated at the top of that class, actually, and that got me a small scholarship, got me started in college. So I went to the Pennsylvania College of Technology, started pursuing a 2-year associate's degree in automotive technology, which is basically tech school with a fancy degree. I finished that degree, got my associate's in that. I decided to stick around for 2 more years, and I chased down my bachelor's degree in automotive business management. That's how I earned. I'm a commissioned officer in the United States Army Reserves. I was in the reserves prior to getting my bachelor's degree, so I was enlisted, and then I commissioned through that bachelor's degree, which is part of the reason why I decided to stick around and get that degree. In the meantime, I worked in various areas of the automotive industry. All through college, I was a manager at a parts store. I was a manager at AutoZone. got my parts experience there. Prior to that, I was a technician at a independent shop, real small, just me and the owner, 2 bays. One had a lift, one didn't. Really, really small operation there, but lots of experience because when you work in an independent, you work on everything and anything. So I was doing head gaskets in one bay, oil changes in the other, and just bouncing back and forth between the two. But the bulk of my experience and how I'm known in social media is my service advisor experience, of which I've worked across 4 different dealerships, 3 different manufacturers. And that's been the bulk of my automotive journey was my service advising time, where I went from a Toyota dealership to a Ford to a Chrysler to a Ford to a Lincoln, to where now I'm self-employed and I'm no longer in the industry except for social media. But yeah, that's the long and short of my automotive experience. But I've been around. I don't have as much experience as everybody else, but I have a lot of general experience across the board. So that, I guess that's been useful and not all at the same time.
Well, a couple things there that strike me is, one, I think that parts knowledge going into the industry is sometimes underrated. Like there's a lot you can learn working a parts counter and being able to understand the questions people ask, or maybe the frustrating parts when a tech comes to you. You know, I think being able to put the shoe on the other foot actually helps you over the course of your career. And maybe, at least it did in my experience, being able to kind of get that insight that you get from running a counter.
Yeah, absolutely, because parts is logistics, and logistics is a very difficult thing to wrap your head around. And on my military side, I'll keep bouncing back and forth. The military side of me, I'm a logistician. That's what I am by trade in the military. That would be my area of expertise, and I'm a commissioned officer in the quartermaster branch, which is a small portion of the logistics side of the Army. So understanding that parts is mostly logistics, and then when you're working at a retail place like AutoZone, anyone that comes through the door either has a chore to do or a problem. No one's coming in because it's a great sunny day and I just want to be in AutoZone unless I want to do a car wash. But either way, so you're dealing with a lot of people they're dealing with problems, and there's frustrations. My part's not here, and I ordered the wrong part. And what do you mean you don't have this one? And you learn how to deal with those obstacles, deal with those angry customers, get them to where they're comfortable and taken care of, understand the logistics and multitasking as well. So yes, absolutely. The parts demographic and background is definitely a very good one to have under your tool belt. Not everybody usually gets an opportunity to work in some sort of a parts arrangement prior to technician service advising, managing, etc.
And I think for those young techs or those techs that are in tech school right now and looking to pick up some extra cash during a weekend, there's plenty of opportunities at parts stores right now to go, be able to get, even if your shop's not open during the weekend, go work at a parts store. I think you learn so much. And one of the things that I think a lot of technicians lack are some of the soft skills, right? Of being able to work with that angry customer, work with other people, right? You're working shoulder to shoulder with other people. But building on those soft skills, it's another way to add to your skills repertoire and get a check on top of it, right?
No, absolutely, because technicians, I always say technicians fix the car, and as a service advisor, I fix the customer, and we work as a team in tandem with that. But technicians do have to work with other people. It's not just cars; they have coworkers, they have managers, and sometimes they do have to speak with customers. And every now and again, they're walking through the service lane, and they're going to have somebody grab their arm and, hey, what do you think about this? And as a business as a whole, you want somebody that can speak to that and hold it professionally and know how to handle that. And customers do. Or test drives with customers too. I've had plenty of technicians that had to hop in a car with a customer and they've taken them hostage and drove away for an hour. and that's a difficult place to be in when you need a technician, but I've seen that as well. So yeah, those soft skills are definitely useful, and that's how I got into the parts department in the first place in college, is because I needed some part-time money in college, and I ended up accepting about up to 30 hours over the weekends and in the evenings. And I was doing, full-time college. I was an ROTC cadet. I was also a reservist already, so I had requirements there, and then I was a student as well, and then a AutoZone employee. Too
busy to get in trouble then. That's a good spot to be in. Yeah.
Yeah, way too busy.
Well, good for you. So let's talk about the social media side. One thing that you've done really well is transition your skills from the shop side into creating visibility around some things that I think are really important with the industry. Can you tell us a little bit about your social media platform or your ability to spread your message on social media?
Yeah, so I've been doing social media for about 2 years now. It started when I was working at my third dealership. funny thing is I started with a rant video because I had an issue throughout my workday, and I just made a real quick rant video, just a random thing. And I posted it. It got a little bit of traction. I said, well, there might be something here. I made another rant video, and it kind of took off, and I started getting a base. And I said, well, maybe I can do something good with this. And I turned it into from ranting to educational because people were commenting some questions and stuff. And that's kind of how it took off. Now, the big part of my following is it all started on TikTok, where I checked today, I have over 92,000 followers on TikTok.
Good for you.
It's been I'm impressed I ever had one follower, to be honest, or even one comment or one like or anything. I mean, it blows me away every single day that I wake up, I check it, and I do my recordings and I post them in the afternoons. But I'm also on YouTube. I'm starting to kind of get some traction there. I'm up to like 650 or 680 subscribers on YouTube.
Good for you.
So I'm getting traction there. I'm on Instagram, but not a huge presence there. Most of my TikToks get posted there, but most of the presence that you'll find me on is TikTok and YouTube. I have some long-form videos on YouTube, and then all my short-term videos are also on YouTube, but mostly on TikTok. And what I identified throughout my time in the industry is nobody really trained me as a service advisor through all my dealerships. I had very little guidance. Now, people did teach me things, coworkers, and maybe a dispatcher or some technicians that pulled me aside or a shop foreman, but it was never a manager. And that, to me, is the person responsible for the training, the management, and the overall oversight, policy, procedure of the shop as a whole. So my experience was that I never received training, and I watched a lot of service advisors come and go because they weren't getting that training. And what that did is make my job more difficult, because what happens to all those repair orders? They come to the person that's actually getting the job done because they know exactly how to do the job, and that's not a boast or anything. You don't know until somebody teaches you. I had education and background in the automotive industry. I worked a couple different positions, technician and parts, so I had an idea of how everything works. So I didn't really need the training, but I just identified right away that the training is not really happening. And the service advisor position is a very pivotal position. It's the only one that deals directly with parts, directly with customers, directly with technicians. It's the information flow. And without that information flow, parts doesn't know what's going on with this ticket. Technicians don't know what's going on with the ticket. And the customer doesn't know, which is the biggest problem. And it's a major disconnect. So the fact that I saw so many service advisors not receiving that training that they needed, it didn't just affect the service advisors or the desk or the customer. It affected our technicians, our parts department, and everyone else that was involved. So I turned my social media page into a training page, free. Everybody can log in, look at it. My content comes from the commenters. I just respond to comments, whatever they want to talk about. That's what we're going to talk about. And that's what it is. It's just same thing every single day. Whatever the topic is of the week, we're just going to train on it.
That is amazing that you've kind of built this following, and starting from your experience in industry. And I think you hit on something that is so important. And I think I'm guilty of it, which is forgetting about the service advisors, right? You touch on management, you touch on the technicians a lot. We do. Mm-hmm. And you talked about that relationship between advisors and technicians and how important it is. And I can't help but think, like, I do that a disservice, right? Me personally, I do that as a disservice because I don't give it enough attention. And a bad service advisor can make a tech's life miserable. A 100%. Great service advisor can make a tech's life absolutely great, right? And it has such an impact on, even from the standpoint of how good of quality a tech you have in the shop, because if you don't have a good team of service advisors, it's really hard to keep those people happy. And there's so much that comes from the standpoint of that service advisor has to be proactive in communication with that technician, with that customer, with the parts department.
Absolutely.
It's organized chaos at some level, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that is the definition of a dealership, is organized chaos. You hit the nail right on the head there. But exactly that. I mean, it's such a critical position. And you think about, I'll give you an example of a write-up that a technician, I used to have technicians approach me all the time and ask me to help them out with tickets that weren't mine. And most advisors won't do that because we're commission-based employees. We're not making money off these other tickets. But I've always seen this as a team-based sport. So if a technician needs my help, I'm going to help that technician, because in kind, I might need help one of these days.
Yes.
So I would grab these tickets and they'd be like, what am I doing with this thing? Can you go talk to this advisor? Can you go help me out? Can you call the customer? Can you do something? And I would look at it, and I'll never forget the one I looked at. Customer states hit wood. That was the whole write-up. He's like, I don't know what this means. I don't know if I can drive this car. I don't know if it's safe. I don't know what to do. So I went and talked to the advisor, and I got the whole story. What happened was the customer was driving, maybe like 20 miles an hour. A piece of lumber fell off the car. They ran it over. So they just wanted a safety check. There was no noises. There was no grinds, no anything. They were just concerned that maybe something got messed up. So they just wanted a real quick safety check. That's it. So it should have been more like customer states, ran over a piece of board at 20 miles an hour. No noises, no concerns, wants safety check. That's it. So the training opportunity for the service advisor, and it also gets the technician back on track. But the thing is that technician's flat rate. Most of them are in the dealerships. So that time to come talk
to the advisor. Yeah,
exactly. That time to come talk to me, go back to their bay, pull the car out, look up the next one, move on, talk to the next advisor because it's probably a similar write-up. You know, all that back and forthing, that wastes a lot of time. It wastes customers' time, advisors' time, the parts time, technicians' time, all because of the service advisor wasn't properly trained on what to ask and what to put on a repair order to give it to the technician.
It's so true. And as we're recording this, I just got off of doing a roundtable discussion for Automotive News for their Fixed Ops Forum. And there was a lady named Meredith on there from Carlisle, and she showed turnover rates by position in a dealership. Mm-hmm. Not surprisingly, service advisors are number one in terms of turnover, and it's like 50%, 49%, something like that, which is insane. Yeah, and we don't. I think when we fall short on training, and you throw that advisor to the wolves, and really don't train them on, how to properly do their job. And a lot of these service advisors are being hired without a ton of background in automotive. I think they are hired to be primarily sales, right, and selling service. And I don't know why, as a dealership or any shop for that matter, you'd want to throw somebody in that seat without training, because it makes you look bad as an employer. But then you're going to set yourself up for that constant turnover. And if you've ever managed a business with constant turnover, that is not a fun business to run. Oops, sorry, Chris, I cut off on you there.
Nope, I got you though. But you're right on the money. I'll give you my first Ford dealership I worked in. When I finally left that dealership, I left after a year of working there, and I was the 17th service advisor to up and leave that dealership. We were losing at least one or two per month, and some of them were long-term, short-term. But it got to be the point where I was the senior most service advisor in the entire dealership, and I had less than a year and a half experience total as a service advisor ever. So, and we're in a massive area. We're in Nashville, Tennessee, so we deal, and it's Ford in Nashville, Tennessee. So you're dealing with all kinds of people, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, the service advisor is the face that represents the shop as a whole. It represents the technician, the management, the dealership, the title, everything to the customer, because that's who you come and see. I take my vehicle into a dealership, they mess something up with it. I'm upset with the person I talk to. I'm not upset with the technician. I'm not upset with the porter. I'm upset with the person that's the representative, which is the service advisor, which has not been trained to properly handle me being upset. And it's crazy when you put it out that way, but it's what I've experienced. And, I started just taking people, because I have a passion for training, because that's what the military does, is we're professional trainers. We constantly train and just be ready. That's the whole name of the game, is readiness. So I have a passion for training. So when a service advisor I see is brand new, I see they just got their clipboard and they got their firm kick to the rear into the service lane and they're out there drowning. I step in, I pull them back out of the water, and I say, okay, this is what we're going to do. You hang out with me for a couple of days. And one of my good friends that in this area that's working in a dealership right now, she came to us as a cashier, and she just got told, hey, we have high turnover service advisors. You're not a cashier anymore. Welcome to being a service advisor. So she didn't sign up for the job, but she got the job. So I took her under my wing. I started her out training her. We worked together for a long time, and she's an incredibly successful service advisor here locally in the town I live in now, because she did leave that dealership eventually. But all it takes is just a couple of weeks of training, and not only just customer service, how to be a service advisor, how to use the DMS, what the policies and procedures are for, SOPs and stuff like that, standard operating procedures at this specific shop. Get them to understand all those things, and then they can better support their technicians, better support their parts, their managers, their customers, and et cetera. It's just, I've never been able to unravel what it is about the service advisor position that we're not training these individuals. I don't know if they think it's just an easy position that it's just talking to customers, but it is so much more than that. It's not even really a job. It's a bunch of tiny little jobs put together. You got to prioritize them and start using time management. I mean, that alone, getting that figured out alone is difficult. So I don't know what it is that we're not training these people, but I'm here to do it on social media. So
well, and it's such an important piece, because one thing that is a really hot topic is trying to find technicians, right? And I think when you view the service advisor position as a throwaway position, right? Like, oh, we can just backfill that easy. We'll just go, get the next person.
Yeah.
What you fail to realize is that is a huge piece to retention of technicians as well. When they feel confident in that relationship with the advisor, they feel confident that advisor is going to actually keep the work flowing into them. A flat rate technician, if they don't have that work flowing into them, and that's one of the biggest reservations of flat rate for a lot of techs, is that they can't control how much work comes in, because they can't control how good the service advisor is. And if you get put with a bad service advisor, it's going to have a negative impact on your paycheck. So I think when we talk through this, it seems so obvious that we need to spend more time training service advisors and being intentional with them so they stay around. If they build good relationships with their team, with the technicians, with the other service advisors, there's so much value in that. It is unreal. And I've heard from so many technicians, oftentimes they'll complain about flat rate, but when they complain about flat rate and you start digging in a little bit more, a lot of times they're complaining about their service advisor, even though it's a flat rate complaint, right? And it's not the service advisor's doing, it's the fact that we as an industry have elected to say, hey, this job's easy to fill. We'll just keep filling it, and we'll just keep looking for techs. Well, this could be a huge piece to the puzzle in terms of retention and recruiting of technicians as well.
I agree, and I think that might be part of it. I think you're onto something there, because at the end of the day, to be a service advisor, it doesn't really require any special type of background. I could take anybody off the street right now that wants to clock in and do a job. I could train them to be a service advisor, and they could be a pretty successful service advisor, because it doesn't require background knowledge like a technician needs to know how cars work, things like that. You got to have some prior schooling, some licensing, depending on what state you're in, to do that job, whereas I can grab anybody and they can be a service advisor. So I think that maybe management sees that, and they can plug someone in that spot, and that's all. Well, I'm plugged in, they're good to go, and that's that's it. But it's such a difficult position, but it's also a very, very fun position. It's overwhelming and terrifying if you don't know what you're doing, but when you do know what you're doing and you're working in a place that is working as it should, it is one of the funnest jobs I've ever been able to work. People think I'm crazy when I say it, but when I worked at I worked at a very small Toyota dealership, and I enjoyed every minute I was there. I was staying late some days, talking to the guys in the shop and going home, because there was such a good rapport and it was such a smooth operating system there that I just enjoyed the job. And it's a very fulfilling job. And once you start building your customer base, you get friendly with the customers, and then everything's very smooth and simple and easy. It's like glass. You clock in, you're on autopilot until you clock back out. There's nothing kind of crazy. A few problems here and there, but problem solving can be fun if you have the tools to do it and the managers to back you up to do it. But yeah, it's just, the training's got to be there. And then the hierarchy, I also comment on this a lot as well. If you ask any service advisor in the industry, or anybody in any industry, ask them, who do they work for? They're going to say, well, I'm going to work for so-and-so. They'll name their manager. I work for my manager. And who do they work for? They work for the general manager. They work for the owner. Well, in that scenario, label for me who is working for the customer. Everybody just looks at you. No. What it is the general manager is working for the manager is supporting and working for the service advisor, so they can then turn work for their customers, because the customers are the people that are keeping the lights on in the business. We tend to forget about this. When you think about it that way, when my service manager is supposed to be supporting, helping, training me, aiding me when I need assistance, I can then be free to do the things I need to do to assist my customers, which will help my technicians get their flat rate, which will make things easier in the parts department, which will make the owner happy, the surveys are there, everything's working like it should. But if we're working for the manager, we can't do that because nobody's working for the customer.
I love that analogy. I think it is so important, and it's really that servant mindset, that servant leadership that I think could serve a lot of our shops really well. And I don't know if you've ever read the book EntreLeadership by Dave Ramsey. He's down in the Nashville area, but it is a great book in talking about servant leadership. And for those of you listening, I think is a great book to listen to or read.
Yeah.
It is really, really good. But servant leadership is really that, right? Is like making
Sure.
sure you're supporting the people on your team and not viewing them as inferior to you, but actually, hey, you know what? You're pretty darn important to what we're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's a pivotal role. It's when I'm operating as a service advisor, when I approach my technician and I say, hey, this one's got a check engine light, rattles on startup, etc., they're really talking to the customer in that moment because I'm being an advocate for that customer because the technician can't be there to talk to every customer. So I'm acting as an advocate. And then in turn, when they say, hey, it needs coil and plugs, it's going to be whatever in parts or wherever, I go back and I call the customer and I give them that information. They're not really talking to me. I'm being the advocate for the technician. So I'm playing both sides. So if I'm not doing my job, there's no communication between the two, and that holds up my technician and holds up my customer. So it is absolutely a pivotal role that's right central of the dealership. I mean, they also work with sales. I mean, we didn't really talk about how they work with sales, but service advisors, because there are times where customers are going to ask you as a service advisor, is it better if I just trade it in? Well, I don't know. Let me get you an estimate. And then I'm going to talk to sales. I mean, it's such a pivotal, central job. Everything flows through this one desk, and we don't really take care of that desk. It's crazy when you lay it out.
It really is. I mean, when you lay down all the different points of contact that an advisor has in a shop, it is just everywhere. It is such an important piece.
Registration is now open for our third annual Tech Mission event. Tech Mission is a 2-day virtual event that brings together technicians, shop owners and managers, and fixed ops directors to discuss how we can work together to promote and improve technician careers. This year's sessions will ignite and challenge shops to actually take action, working with technicians and schools to elevate the industry. It's completely free to attend, but you must register. Even if you can't attend live, register anyways, and we'll email you the recordings after the event. You can register at WrenchWay.com/events. Link is in the show notes.
Now, I want to ask you this, and this is a really loaded question, but do you think being a service advisor could be a long-term role for somebody? Do you think there's dealerships out there that could turn this into a primo position that people want to come work at, and they stay for years and years and years?
100%. 100% because I've seen it and I've really strided for it. There are dealerships in this area that I kept an eye on because I wanted in them so bad because I knew that the operation there was better than the current one I had. I knew that the pay plan there was better than the one I currently had, and they had a select number of service advisors, and you just keep eyes on that to see when one of those desks free up to get your resume in there, go say hello to the manager as soon as possible. There are dealerships in this area alone that there's been service advisors that have worked there for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and you can definitely build a retirement off of that. You can make a career out of it. Now, most people want to get to that service manager position, but there's X amount of service manager positions and X amount of advisor positions. You can make, in some dealerships I've seen, service advisors make more money than service managers in certain months. So It's really all about, what tools you have. Your pay plan is a big one because that's going to be different everywhere you go. But you can definitely make a long-term career out of advising service. You absolutely can.
Well, and I think when you look at it, if you're really good at it, there's a huge opportunity to build a following where you're at, right? And you talk about the pay plans and, hopefully, and maybe walk me through that a little bit, because that might be one thing that I could learn a little bit on. I know some generic pay plans for service advisors, but you as coming from that role, what was it that you looked for in a pay plan as a service advisor?
So when I interviewed with a dealership and I got their pay plan, the pay plan doesn't tell you anything. It just tells you what the specifications are. So I always told people, because people would reach out to me, it's like, hey, I'm about to interview with so-and-so dealership. I don't get this pay plan. I'm like, what you need to do, get the pay plan, and then you need to request the last 3 months of their service advisor's numbers. And you need to average out it's a lot of math. You need to average out everything that they have done, and then you need to apply their averages over the last 3 months to your pay plan, and that calculates a potential average that you're going to have, because you're probably going to fall, middle to low of what they're currently doing till you get established. So basically the pay plan is going to be, I've seen so many, a percentage of parts, a percentage of your CSIs, or X amount of dollars for every 5-star. I've seen that. Some people just do straight up, you get X percent of your gross sales total across the whole board. Whatever it is, you need to get a report of at least the last 3 months is what I recommend. If you get the last month, that's okay. But if it's February, it's going to be low. If it's going to be like July, it's going to be high. So you want the last 3 months, get a good average out the pertinent pieces that are important. And if you've never done this before, if you never wrote service, this is going to be a very difficult thing for you to do. It's one of those things where you're just going to jump in there and see what you make. But to calculate what you're going to make, it's a lot of math, and you have to be careful, because sometimes they'll just, isn't that such a great pay plan? They'll throw it at you because they know you're green, you don't know, but it does. It looks great on paper, and you get in there and you realize, well, this shop only does X amount of dollars gross per month. Like, I really can't make a lot of money with this current pay plan. You have to do the numbers before you sign on to just know what you're going to be making if you want to calculate it pre-hand.
What types of questions would you ask of a pay plan? Like, what is it that maybe might seem obvious, but an advisor needs to maybe dive a little further into in terms of what questions to ask? Well,
as far as analyzing a pay plan, and you can learn a lot about what your manager wants out of you by looking at that pay plan. I worked in a dealership one time where probably 60% of the pay plan referenced CSI, so customer service index, your survey scores. So I knew right away that the focus here wasn't so much sales, but customer service. And I've also worked in shops where you get the pay plan, and there's no CSI bonus whatsoever. It's the Wild West out here. Like, it doesn't matter. But they paid you a percentage of your gross sales and before or after profit, whatever it's going to be. They paid you primarily off what you sold. So you know right then and there that this shop doesn't really concern itself with customer service, but more or less sales. So that's an indicator of what kind of service advising position you're getting into. Is it customer service based, or is it numbers based? And that's going to change drastically your experience as a service advisor and your customer experience as a service advisor, and what your goals are going to be month to month, and how your techniques are going to move month to month. So those are some of the things you can analyze to see what a shop goes for. But the best pay plans I've seen are the ones that give you a piece of each little pie, because that keeps a service advisor interested in everything. I want a little percentage of my parts, a little percentage of my labor. That way I don't discount one or the other. Also CSI is up there. That way I'm making sure my customers are taken care of. That's, as a manager, that's the best one you can set up, because that makes the advisor interested in the parts, interested in the labor. So the technician and the parts department are both taken care of, and interested in the customer, because the surveys are there as well.
You just absolutely flipped a switch for me, which was really cool.
Yeah.
Which is basically, you can judge a dealership's priorities based on that pay plan. The whole dealership essentially, because who's setting those priorities it's coming from the top down, right?
Yeah.
And so if they're incentivized, the GMs are incentivized on X, and it's far more money rather than CSI, or vice versa. Like, you can tell a lot about a dealership based on that. I had not thought about it in that context before.
Yeah, and I've worked in both styles. I've worked in a shop that just cared about sales. They would tell me to tell customers to pound sand. It doesn't matter. If they're not buying, they got to go. Show me the taillights. That was a phrase. That was a phrase they would use. They're not buying, show me the taillights. So I was like, that's crazy. And then I've worked at dealerships where it's, and I've worked in dealerships where it's all about customer service. And no matter what, as long as we get that 5-star survey, that's what's going to make me happy here. And what is it going to take to get that from you? So I've worked in both sides, and it changed drastically my experience as a service advisor. And depending on what you prefer as an individual that wants to work as a service advisor, it's going to change your happiness level with what you're doing. Because if you're not somebody that really wants to be that customer service representative, this particular service advisor role is probably not going to be for you, probably overall, because you are a customer service representative, but the focus might not be for you. Whereas if you're really into sales and you're really into percentages and stuff like that, you might want to gravitate towards the side of the house or the dealerships that really care about sales over top of that customer service. But in the perfect world, in the correct world, in my opinion, it's in the middle, because you can't get sales if you don't service your customers. So it takes back and forthing, but there are polar opposites in the industry, and a lot of people have probably experienced that, just like I have.
That is really unique insight. I'm so happy to hear that. Now we have a lot of managers that listen to this show, right? And I think there are times maybe where they get frustrated with their own turnover, right? Maybe they're seeing turnover in their own shop and are concerned over it. Do you have any advice to them on how to approach that? Like, is it as simple as a pay plan, or are there other things that they should be looking at in terms of how to take care of their service advisors?
Leadership, empathy, and discipline would be the three keywords I'd go to. And I'm going to put my military hat back on and define leadership was the process of influencing people with purpose, direction, motivation while operating to accomplish your mission and improve your organization. If you can focus on those things in that definition, you're going to be a step ahead already. And what I mean by that is if you have high turnover, if you have high turnover as a manager and your service advisors are leaving you in droves, that is your fault. You're the service manager. You can delegate your authority by giving your manager or your advisors what they need to do to make decisions. Hey, if you want to do discounts, go ahead and do them. If you want to do a free break job every now and again, go ahead and do them. I give you the full authority to do that. But if you have a particular advisor that over abuses that and has all their buddies come in and get free break jobs, they've abused that authority. But ultimately, it's the manager's responsibility to own that because it's their program, their policy, their procedure, their training, their advisor. So you can delegate authority. You cannot delegate your responsibility. And if you have high turnover, you got to look inside. You got to say, what am I doing wrong? Am I not leading these people? Am I not being empathetic? Am I not listening to them? Have they been trying to tell me what they need support-wise from me? Am I training them properly? Are they happy working here? Do they like their hours? Can I adjust anything? Can I set up shifts differently? Is everything okay at home? I mean, those are questions you probably can't ask, but those are things you got to think about when you're in a leadership role. And that's the biggest thing is, and the discipline portion, so I can touch on that. You got to be disciplined enough to constantly pursue that with your service advisors, constantly check in with them, constantly make sure that they're good to go, constantly make sure they don't have questions, constantly make sure they have the tools that they need to do their job. And by tools, not just pens and papers, not just computers and RO sheets. They also need the tools up here in their head, the training, so that they know when this happens, I react with this. Those SOPs have to be in place so that they can react, because if they know how to react, it's not even stressful anymore. I just know this just happened, so I'm going to react with this. So it's leadership, empathy, and discipline. That's what I would reference every service manager listening right now. If you have a high turnover, it's your fault. You got to fix it. It's okay, but you got to fix it.
I think that's a great leadership lesson in general, right? I think that can be applicable to about any profession, but specific to what we're talking about here, I think listening and having a good relationship with your advising team is so important, and it's important in any aspect of your shop. But with that side, I look at it as far as like if you go out and just chew out that service advisor for making a mistake or something like that, and you're a leader, how do you think they're going to treat that next customer? How do you think they're going to treat the rest of their day? They might just be defeated at that point. And if you're just kind of constantly pushing their nose into the ground, and you're wondering why there's turnover. I think you're right. It's looking in the mirror and saying, "Hey, I gotta adapt my style here a little bit."
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have a service manager that just absolutely just does not want to be there, they come in every day. I know they're out there. I know they're out there. But if you come in every day, you hang your head, you're like, "Oh, I don't want to be here," and you're slouching, and you're leaving at 3:00 every day. What are your advisors going to do? They're going to come in and be like, "I don't want to be here. I don't want to help my customers. I also want to leave at 3:30. That way the manager doesn't know I'm leaving early." Seen all this. As a manager, your advisors are a reflection of you as a manager. Whatever you embody is what they're going to embody, because you are the quote unquote, you're a leader for them. I mean, you're a manager, but you're also the leader. They're going to look to you for guidance. They're going to look for you for answers, and they want to be you one day. Every service advisor wants to be the manager, so they're going to do what you're doing because they want that job. So You're not just leading by, teaching and training. You're leading by example. So how you carry yourself, how you conduct yourself, what verbiage you use, how you look when you walk across the service lane, they're going to mimic that in some small way, because at the end of the day, they want to be you. So they're going to act just like you. So act right.
That is great advice. Now, I want to take that and swing it to the opposite end of the table, which is technicians. Do you have any advice for technicians on how to deal with service advisors?
They're going to be upset, but patience. Because at the end of the day, I say this all the time. No technician signed up to train a service advisor, yet technicians are constantly training service advisors.
Yes.
And that's really what happens because, and they trained me, honestly, in a lot of different ways because I'd come back and I'd be like, hey, this, and this. And they'd be like, actually, you need to do it this way, because, and they would teach me that in that moment. That is not their job to show me how any of that's supposed to work. I'm supposed to know this before but they taught me. So when dealing with service advisors, patience, don't be upset, be approachable, I guess is what I would say is be approachable because they're going to have questions. And until the industry corrects course and starts training these individuals, unfortunately, as a technician, you're going to end up training them on some level, which you have a vested interest in because that's going to build rapport. They're going to start doing the things you want them to do it in the way you want to do it, and it's going to make things run smooth for you. But be approachable because if you're not approachable and they're afraid to ask you a question, they're not going to ask anyone else that question because they probably exhausted all their resources, and they're just going to go for it. And when they go for it, you know what's going to happen. Your parts are going to be all wrong. It's going to be crazy. The repair order is not going to be right. It's going to be warranty when it shouldn't be, or customer when it should be warranty, back and forth. And you're going to have this big problem to unravel, and guess what? You're going to end up training them anyways because it's going to fall on you. So that patience and be approachable, I guess, would be the best things. Don't be afraid to show them a thing or two. You know, they don't know how cars work, and that does help them a little bit. But in my opinion, they don't really need to know how cars work. They just need to know how customers work.
That's a great point.
This week's episode of Beyond the Wrench is sponsored by WheelTime. The WheelTime Network is composed of 16 technically proficient parts and service providers with nearly 200 locations spanning all 50 states and Canada. Truck and coach repair consistency and quality are their top priorities. If you're searching for a consistent, reliable, and trustworthy truck and coach repair partner, contact WheelTime at wheeltime.com.
Now, do you see any dealerships that are out there having kind of a formalized training with a technician? So the service advisor going to maybe sit with a technician and job shadow them for a few days or anything like that?
I've heard of that. I've heard of job shadowing. People have told me they've been through that. I've never personally seen it myself in the industry. I have no experience in it, but I can't see it being overly effective.
Sure.
I would reference if there's going to be some learning to be done between technician and service advisor, I would just keep it ticket to ticket, RO to RO. And I would tell service advisors that, hey, if you take a diagnosis from a technician, say why. You know, what causes this? Is it common? You know, questions like that. Technicians won't mind answering that on the fly because it's right now. It's on this ticket. It's relevant. It's not just a random, hey, what do tires do? You know what I mean? Like it makes sense because the technician is interested in you selling this job to the customer, so they're going to give you the tools that you need to sell it to the customer. So if you ask those questions about the tickets at hand, which is relevant, that's probably the best way to get some on-the-fly training between technician and advisor, and it builds that rapport. But as far as shadowing goes, maybe it's useful. I've never done it myself, but I'm not entirely sold. Of course, I have no experience, but I'm not entirely sold that if that would be an actual useful activity. Especially imagine taking a technician and having them shadow a service advisor for a day. You know, they might start throwing things around and not being very happy.
Well, give me an idea. What did your technician teams look like? So you typically had 4 techs, or how many techs did you have that were kind of with you as far as the service advisor role?
Up to 38. We never had teams.
For one advisor? Oh, okay, so you never had teams.
Yeah, that was it. So I've never really worked with teams before. I know that there's very successful dealerships out there that do that, but across all the places I worked, there were no teams. It was more by category. So we had our engine technicians, our transmission technicians, our drivability, our electrical, our hybrid, etc. And you knew that when you wrote a ticket, it was going to go to that group of technicians, this group of technicians, and that's how you knew how long diagnostics would take. Like if I have 2 transmission technicians in a super busy area, I'm about 2 weeks out on diagnostics there, but I know my check engine lights go drivability, and I have 5 technicians over there, and they're about a day behind at all times. So that was kind of the breakdown for me. So I worked with everybody. There wasn't a technician I didn't work with, but depending on what kind of tickets I was writing up at the time, determined on what group, what subset of technicians I was going to be working with.
How many advisors, like say, and I know this is probably changed per location, but
oh yeah,
how many advisors were you typically working with?
In my smallest facility, I worked with one other service advisor. In my largest, I worked with about seven other service advisors. So there's 8 of us total. And that was just on the Ford side of the Ford Lincoln store. So that would be the min and the max. But I've been in so far up the creek that I was the last service advisor, and there was 38 technicians, and I was the only one. They opened the doors, and they just started running me. Yeah, I'm telling you, it's been a very interesting ride, and that's why the experience is there, because I trial by fire on that one. But yeah, that was I'll give you the long and short of it. I went for military training for 2 weeks. I came back, and everyone was gone. And there's just tickets on every desk. And my manager's like, "I'm so happy you're back." I'm like, "I bet you are." So
that's insane.
It is.
I just, and it kind of shows you maybe lack of priority for the position too.
Oh, yeah.
To end up in that spot. And I get it. Like, it can happen. The job isn't meant for everybody. I don't think, there's a reason there's turnover. But even going back to that sense of it, if you're going through high turnover and it's, you've looked in the mirror and you've got, fairly good management, everybody's got room to improve. But
yeah,
I think if you're looking at it from that aspect, there's a lot of potential that you're hiring the wrong person as well. Wrong personality, wrong skill set, that kind of thing. I think your skill set is really unique because you've got a good personality. You have the military background. You've got some really desirable skills. But I think when I talk to a lot of shops, what they're looking for an advisor is a salesperson, right? They don't care what their background is. They're going to train them up on the automotive side as long as they can sell. And I think that might set people up for failure in a lot of ways.
I agree with that. And I've been involved in this debate before, and it comes up on my social medias a lot that people commonly think, and people in the industry commonly think, that the service advisor position is a sales position. And I have wrestled with that myself, and I've come to the determination that it is not a sales position, even though we sell. It's a customer service position. And if you focus on it that way, even if you don't believe it, if you focus on, I challenge anybody, if you focus on customer service for the next 30 days, the next month, it's the beginning of the month right now, I don't know when this will drop, but if it's the beginning of the month, if you focus on customer service for the next month, I think you'll be impressed with how much you sell. Because if you're properly servicing your customers, if you're selling yourself, that's the only thing you need to sell is yourself. If you're selling yourself, everything else will take out. Because at the end of the day, that customer has a car that's broken. It needs to be fixed, and it's going to be fixed. And it's up to you to decide if your shop is going to be the ones that fix it. Because if they don't like you, they're going to take their car, they're going to swipe the card for Diag, whatever, argue about it, not pay Diag. They're going to go somewhere else with their diagnostic, and they're going to get it fixed with someone they like, someone that's cheaper, someone that's something else, and it's going to get fixed no matter what. So if you as a service advisor are selling yourself, and it's customer service based, and that is your goal, you are going to fix that car, because that car is getting fixed. I don't care. It's going somewhere to get fixed. It's not just going to go away forever. Not going to buy a horse. No. They're going to fix that car. So sell yourself, focus on customer service, and I promise you, the sales will take care of themselves. You just have to be brave enough to try it.
So let's talk about that, the Diag side. I think that's such a frustrating part in our industry as a whole, not just to advisors, but to dealer principals, general managers, technicians, everybody. And it feels like it's still something we as an industry are terrible at in terms of training our customers as to what diagnostic time is, why it is so expensive, any best practices for selling diagnostic time, or best ways to go about it, because it can get into fuzzy territory where everybody's frustrated.
Yeah, and there's so many angles with this. And if you're a service advisor that's struggling with that part where you have to tell them it's $139.95 for diagnostics, the number one thing you do is say it with confidence. And you need to say it. You can't just write the ticket and then be like, I'll worry about this later. I'll bake it into the repair. You need to be upfront. You need to tell them, hey, listen, you got a check engine light. It's rattling. Hey, you got a squeal here, a squeal there, a rattle over here. It's going to take a little bit of time. Get your quote estimate out there and then say it's $139.95 before taxes, whatever your diagnostic fee is, and then see how the customer reacts from there. And there's techniques you can use to deal with the rejection from that if you see it. But if you deliver it the right way, confidently, if the customer has questions, answer them. But most customers, in my experience, if you're confident, they understand it's diagnostics. And if they buck it a little bit, say, oh, you just plug it in. AutoZone, you just plug it in and read the code. There's ways to package that, and you just say, listen, that code is a starting point. It gives me the address. It takes a trained technician to go into the house, look at the kitchen, look at the living room, look at the garage, identify in what room the problem is, and then identify what inside that room is the problem. And that code is not going to tell you that. That code is just the address. I know what address has the problem. I got to go inside and figure out what's wrong. And
that's good.
Yeah,
I haven't heard it put that way before.
Yeah.
That is really good.
And that's something that everybody understands because most customers live in houses. So
yes,
so they understand. But diagnostics, and there's a lot of people that think that diagnostics should be free if I do a repair, and there's a lot of shops that do that. But diagnostics is probably one of the most difficult portions of a technician's job. That's actually digging in and finding out what's wrong. If you go to any shop that breaks it down, diag team, repair team, whatever team, maintenance team, the diag team is usually the cream of the crop because that's the hardest part of the job. And the fact that people want to do it for free or think we should do it for free is absolutely insane because it is the most value we bring to any table. You can come to me, you can pay me for my diagnostic, you can take that piece of paper, go buy the parts and fix it yourself at that point. Because most people can change a part. Sure, there's some technical aspects to it, some reprogramming, some stuff you have to do, some parameters you have to meet. But most people can take and replace a part in the driveway or take it to somebody else that may have a cheaper labor rate and replace it there. That diagnostic is the most precious thing that any shop can provide for their customers.
Yeah, and I think the role of a service advisor in educating a customer in that regard and why diag costs money and being able to properly... I love how you said it with confidence. You're talking to the customer with confidence, and then like when you sit down and you look at how crazy it is that we've gone for any stretch of period of time without charging for diagnostics, blows my mind. At any point over the history of this business, this industry, why we ever went that direction seems so ludicrous to me. And that, even back in the day, like say somebody's diagnosing a carburetor back in the day, that still took your most skilled person to do that. And here we were just giving it away. And I just, there's no other industry that does that. There's no other industry that says, hey, go ahead and do that. And I don't think the parts houses do a great job for us in that regard, because if they're putting a commercial out there that says, hey, come over here and we'll plug in this scanner and tell you got a bad O2 sensor, and then
it's always the O2 sensor too.
Yeah,
it really is. I work there. I'm telling you right now. I sold so many O2 sensors.
every time, and then they replace the O2 sensor. Like, well, that wasn't actually the cause of the code,
right?
And then trying to go through, like, it's just like, oh my gosh, why do we keep doing this?
Right, and even if you want to reference it a different way, you can say, "Hey, listen, your concern is you have an oil leak. You got a puddle under your car every night. There's no check engine light. I can't plug a scanner in and tell you where that oil leak is. I actually have to lift the vehicle up. I have to examine it. I have to look at it. I have to clean it. I have to do all the things I have to do. I have to pressure test it if it's coolant, and I have to look and see where that leak is coming from. And that takes a trained eye to know where to look, what seals leak, if it even is an oil seal, because most people don't even know which seal holds oil, which one holds coolant. So it takes a special technical eye to know what's what in the car to know where the fault is. You got to identify the fault, and then you can identify the solution for the fault. But that is, just like you said, it's just such a precious thing that technicians do. And when we got away from not charging the diagnostics, it set us up for failure because now customers expect that. Especially if you're in a shop where you had a weak service advisor or a weak manager that wasn't backing up the advisor, and the advisor just said, whatever, I'm just going to do this. When your customers come to the shop and they're like, well, it's always been free. Well, you got to be the bad guy and say, well, it's not anymore, and you're not the hero anymore. And that's a very difficult spot to be in. And it takes a long time to turn that back around to where we're charging for diagnostics.
Our ancestors in this business kind of set us up for failure in a lot of regards, because, if you look at the not so distant past, labor rates were $35 an hour, and at one point, and like that, we were so far behind the 8 ball earlier, and that I as much as I hate technology from time to time, I also give it credit for pushing the envelope on this, because I think if it wasn't for fuel injection coming in the 80s, whatever it was, it made us charge more for the labor, and from a dealership setting, it's forced dealer principals to look at the service department as different than just a loss leader, which is what it was referred to forever, up until recent years. I mean, some still look at it that way, and rather than a profit center, which is just mind-boggling to me.
Well, I've always argued that point. I've always seen service as that is the dealership, because at the end of the day, service sells cars.
Yeah.
Because you think about it, if I'm a customer and I come here and I buy a car for the first time ever, and I drive it home and it's time for service, I bring it in, and I really liked Chris, the service advisor. He was pretty cool, and I take it home and I bring it back in, and I liked him again. Like, this place is actually, the coffee's great. I'm going to go home, bring it back. When it's time to buy another car, I love the service here so much. I love the team here so much. I'm buying another car from you. Whereas if I come back and Chris decided to let the technician smudge mark my car, and it took like 3 hours longer, and the coffee wasn't even warm anymore, and it didn't care about me, and it smelled funny, and they weren't even tucking in their shirts, and this place is so unprofessional, I'm not buying another car from these people. So the sales department will sell the first car. The service will sell every single car thereafter. So we have to take care of our salespeople, especially our service advisors. And on top of that, to add a little layer to that, it's not just our service advisors, it's our express writers, the new people.
Yeah.
They're the ones that see those customers every single visit. They're the ones that are going to keep that customer retention in place. And they're our greenest service advisors. Crazy when you think about it.
It really is. It is so interesting to me, this whole conversation, and how we have to approach this differently in, why we have a 40 to 50% turnover rate as with service advisors, and how impactful that is. Because if you're just turning service advisors over and over and over, and that customer comes in and sees a different face every single time, and it's a different experience every time, regardless of your process, because it's different personalities that are involved. Like, I hope we start to take this more serious. Now, we're getting close to being done with our time here. I did want to touch on, we talked about training, and it feels like there's a lot of needs for training for service advisors. How does a dealership, or any shop for that matter, go about putting a program in place, or figuring out even where to start? Because there are so many different aspects to this, and they're not going to go get a 4-year degree in service advising. Mm-hmm. So, and oftentimes they're thrown to the fire. What do we change here? What training do we focus on? How do we get a service advisor standing on their own 2 feet and do it in a productive way that's going to result in a really successful person?
Well, you start by having them follow me on TikTok.
There you go. Shout out. We'll make sure we get that linked out there.
Make sure. So you shouldn't have to. I'll start by this. You really should not have to train your service managers on how to train their service advisors. If they're a service manager, they should already have that knowledge, at least at a baseline level, because that's their main responsibility, is their people. They're a manager. They manage their people. They manage the business, whatever they do. But if you're a manager and you're trying to unravel this and figure it out, you need to first sit down and say, what are my policies and procedures? Like, what do I want my advisors doing? What's the focus in my customer service and my sales? You got to find out what your policies and procedures are. And once you have that, you train out of that. Now, what in my policy and procedures do I want to teach my service advisors? And from that, you can build a small curriculum. It doesn't have to be like school, but you can build out, these are the main things I want my advisors doing. Now I have to go teach them those things. I have to tell them this is what I'm looking for. I have to answer their questions. And then I have to be the example, maybe write up a few tickets with them, walk them through a couple of repair orders, get them up and running. Hey, crawl, walk, run. I'm going to crawl with you. Then you can walk. I'll be just behind you if you need help. And then you're running. And if you need me, come get me. So that would be the starting point. Policies and procedures, derive what you want to teach your advisors out of that, and then teach your advisors those things, and then let them take the ball and run with it, and they'll come back and see you as needed. So I would say that in a quick way, that's the quick way that you can do your training with your service advisors, get them up to par and get them up to where they're actually running. And then they're running to their technicians, they're running to their parts, and they're getting all the things they need done. There's other programs out there, and I'll shout out a company that I work with, I contract with, called Rockhead. They used to focus, well, they still focus on sales, but they recently started breaking into the service side. And what they do is they sell training programs to dealerships, and it's short form on an app videos that's just like real quick 3-minute videos that are educational, real to the point, teach advisors what they need to know to be a service advisor. If they subscribe to that, they'll see me because I do a lot of videos for them. But yeah, Rocket is another excellent tool that you can utilize as a service manager or a dealership as a whole to start training your service advisors. It also works for the sales side, but I'm involved with the service side. So there's also third-party external training services that you can tap into as needed. So there's a few options out there, but basically it's all up to the service manager to analyze that and make those decisions.
That's great advice. Last advice that I'm going to ask for, advice for those service advisors that are listening out there. And I'll leave this vague because you work with them a lot.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to them in terms of how to advance their career, how to be happier in their day-to-day life, that kind of thing?
Learn. What you put into it is what you get out of it. You can't sit in your office chair and scroll on TikTok and Facebook and every other social media and just expect the world to come to you. You got to get out in the service lane. That's where you make your money. That's where you make your customers. You have to be, aggressive and tenacious. I know I said it's not a sales position, but sales is a contact sport. You are selling. So it requires you to get out there. Don't let the negativity, because it's in every single dealership, every single service department, there's negativity. Don't let that get to you. You just focus on you. You take care of your people. You take care of yourself, and just learning your craft. If you're a service advisor, a new recall comes out, you read it. And customer service is what I'll end on. Is customer service is what you do. You fix the customer. You let the technician fix the car, and it's a beautiful little union between technician and advisor. You guys tag team it because there's a car and a customer. There's a technician and a service advisor. And if you're not focusing on that customer, that's a key part. So customer service, I promise the sale will take care of itself. But if you can just work on customer service skills and then work on your craft and get out there and get after it, I promise that you'll eventually get it figured out. Even if you don't have that training support from your manager, I promise you'll get it figured out.
Amazing advice, amazing conversation. You're a really talented individual, and
Thank you.
This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot throughout this, and I think as we start to explore that relationship between techs and service advisors more, I think this podcast is very important to that. And I just truly appreciate you taking the time to spend with us here today, Chris. It was a true pleasure. This was a lot of fun.
No, thank you for having me on. I have a passion for the industry. I'm not in the industry anymore. I'm just here as a commenter on social media, and I love the industry. I love everybody in it. I just want to continue to give back to the industry that got me started and got me on the path that I'm on now. So I just appreciate you giving me the platform to be able to talk about it long form, because on my social media I don't get that opportunity. So thank you so much for having me on, and I had a lot of fun too. This is a great conversation.
All right. So how do people follow you?
You can follow me on any social media, same username, Chris_MF_Craig, TikTok, YouTube. You can find me on Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook. Those are my main forums. You just head over there, type it in. You'll find me right there, my smiling little face around a little yellow frame. So.
I would encourage everybody to do that. I know our marketing team have followed you and are fans of you, and I've started to follow you. And I think what you're doing out there is incredible. So keep up the good work. Hope you'll be back on another podcast at some point here in the near future. And just keep doing what you're doing. You're making an impact out there.
Yeah, thank you. And for what you guys do over at WrenchWay, I really appreciate that as well.
Oh, thank you. Have a great day. We'll talk soon.
All right, sir. Have a good